All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our our last panel of the day. I would love to welcome Manny Toro to the virtual stage. Manny is the VP of Music Marketing at SoundCloud, and he's going to be our moderator for our panel about genre and community. So I would love to bring Manny to the stage.
Hi, hello everyone. Again, Manny Toro, Global VP of Music Marketing at SoundCloud. And at SoundCloud, one of the most important things for us and to us is really about building the artist and fan connection and really fostering community. So I'm super excited to be moderating today's session around music, genre, and the creation of community. So obviously in this panel today, we're going to be discussing exploring the powers of genres that drive community, both online and offline. From the global reach of afrobeats to the personal connection of your childhood favorites, these panelists will discuss how music creates identity and fosters loyalty among fans. And so in the interest of time, I know we want to get right into it. I'd love to have Claudia, Jessica, and Elizabeth quickly introduce themselves before we get into the discussion. Claudia?
Awesome. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Claudia Gunn. I'm from New Zealand, and I have a company called Little Wild Music where I make original music for children.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Norton. I'm a photojournalist and a creative director. I work primarily freelance. My current projects that I'm working on are Bamboozle. And in the past, I've worked with Emo Night Brooklyn, Live Nation VIP, MTV News, and a few other editorial outlets. And I'm very excited to speak about genre and community today.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Ntiamoah-Quarshie. I'm the general manager for Boomplay Ghana. I also manage a couple of Ghanaian artists and do some PR works for African artists in the region of Ghana. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. So community, right? It's sometimes referred to as a scene, sometimes a subculture. But I just really want to know what the music community means to you and some examples of why do you think they exist. Again, I'm going to kick it off with you, kick off to Claudia.
Okay, awesome. Well, I would come to the concept of community in two ways. Very quickly, there's artist communities where a genre or a scene builds with like-minded artists, and whether that's local or sort of global communities of artists connecting and sharing sort of aspirations or ideals or musical styles. I think that's a real strong driver that creates then connection with audiences who often may be artists themselves, or in the children's music scene, often educators, parents, teachers in schools or in kindergartens. So a lot of those communities, I would say, would be intersecting circles. And it's a very collaborative and supportive environment. So that's what community is in the children's scene, I think.
Amazing. Thank you, Claudia. Elizabeth? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. So for me, music community or scene is basically a group or a subset of the whole music culture scene in I'm going to use Africa and Ghana as an example. In Ghana, where most music creative or other creative in the entertainment industry basically have a particular goal, or they're binded by a type of soundscape, or sometimes even aesthetics, how they dress, the type of sound they want to put out, and all of that. One of the very popular ones that we have pretty much experienced in Ghana and Nigeria, for example, is the alternative that we call Alte over here. So the alternative scene is basically, they have a particular soundscape. They have a way of life, sort of. They want to look a certain type of way, and they want their sound to be produced in a certain type of manner. Basically, that's what it is to me.
Amazing. Thank you, Elizabeth. Jessica?
Yeah, and basically the same as Claudia and Elizabeth just said. music is such a huge unifier, and there's something so cool about an artist or a genre bringing people from all lives together. And it's so wonderful that scenes or subcultures form solely around a shared love of an artist or a genre. And there's a band that I'll point out in particular called The Main, and they have a very fascinating subculture in the emo pop punk world, which is where I'm mostly based. And their listeners who span globally and across ages are so like-minded and in sync with each other that they jokingly kind of consider themselves a cult. And they're all drawn to this particular type of music, vibe, aesthetic, and almost a lifestyle that the band has effortlessly made, not even like purposely curated. And the same can be said for like the Swifties or the Harry Styles fans, even if they're a little bit more contrived and orchestrated commercially or branded. It's kind of just this unifier.
Amazing, amazing. Elizabeth, I want to go back to you, just because Afrobeats is one of our, selfishly one of our biggest and fastest growing genres on SoundCloud. But you just put me on to Alta. So when we go and we think about Boomplay, I would love to hear even more about those genres and communities that you're seeing popping up both online and in real life.
Okay, so just a little like history about Afrobeats, right? So usually when the S is added to it, they kind of term it as an envelope of all the type of genres that is coming out of Africa, right? So once they say that, it's like the main term just for different sounds in Africa. At Boomplay, fortunately for us, like our main focus is African music, any music by an African or made in Africa. Now, we are quite fortunate to have different branches. So I sit in the Ghana branch, there's a Nigerian branch, there's Tanzania, there's Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and then there's Kenya. Now, with these branches, it helps us to actually focus on the sub-genres that are coming out from each individual country. So an example for Ghana is we do have High Life, which actually has grown to be a part of Afrobeat. We do have High Life. Now, the very recent genres that pretty much are coming out because of certain communities is there's Asaka. It's actually a mixture of drill, and then drill music, hip hop, hip life, all of that merged into one, and it's mainly coming from Kumasi in the Ashanti region of Ghana. So it's not even in the main capital. It's like a different region where most of the boys and the girls there are actually putting in their culture, their way of life, their street understanding, or how they grow up and all of that into the kind of music that they're doing. If you move to Nigeria, there's also like Fuji music, which is totally different from the typical Afrobeat that you would hear on radio, or the typical Afrobeat that you would actually playlist. Now, if you go to Kenya, there's also, if you go to Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, there's Coupé de Calais, different types of ideologies being merged into all of this. So people actually use their experiences, their culture, and then tap into what they have known or what they actually grew up on to develop and then to build on new communities, which is actually springing new genres. So one very popular Ghanaian artist doing Asaka is called Yaltog, and then he had a collaboration with Stormzy in the UK, because again, drill music, Asaka music is quite similar. So we at Boomplay actually have the opportunity to actually make specific playlists tailored for specific listeners and music lovers, basically. So there are lots of genres coming out, and they as Jessica said, there's like a cult following for such sub-genres in the community.
That's amazing, amazing. Elizabeth, I'm going to be emailing you for that whole list of
definitely.
Because you're putting me on to a lot. You're putting on
definitely.
Me on to a lot. And I love that around, again, with the brunches. So I actually want to take it to Brooklyn real quick, and Jessica talk about the, emo night as a form of community meetup. I'd love to, kind of hear about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So communities specifically of fans or music genres are so electric. And personally, I've randomly made so many friends just by striking up a conversation and it's somehow getting to a point where you find that you have a shared love for something. So I'll take it a little bit away from emo for a second. I am a huge Jonas Brothers fan. And when I find someone who also loves them, it turns into this thrilling, like back and forth conversation where you're decoding lyrics, reminiscing on live shows, laughing over inside jokes you have with the band. And it's just, it's like you're speaking a different language. Like anyone on the outskirts would think you're speaking in code. And with the world of social media now, it's so much easier to find people who get what you love. You can just tweet and be like, hey, I'm going to this show, I'm going alone, and another fan will reach out and say like, hey, my friends and I are going and you should join us, and you just kind of like gravitate towards each other, whether it's like over the internet or in person. And that is something that specifically happens at emo nights very often. And specifically, emo nights usually run at the same venue every month or so. So when people start attending regularly, they recognize people, they get to know each other, which usually leads to, like following each other on Instagram or Facebook, connecting in real life and online. And when you're into emo nights, that usually means that you like to attend other emo and pop punk shows in the area and you start to see the same people. So it's funny that when you go to all these shows and you have all these things in your area, a community is organically formed and kind of even bleeds into other areas.
No, I love that. I love that. I'm trying to touch on everyone's expertise in their background. So I'm gonna go a little bit of a quick left here and looking at you, Claudia. And I have, I have a 3-year-old and I have a 6-year-old. You and I had some brief discussion about that before, but a lot of people don't talk about children's music in the mainstream music industry. Obviously those loyal, very, very loyal fan bases. So I'd love to hear from you about just, again, what kind of builds a children's community, within music, and then also kind of like the intersection of the kid and the parent, because we were all kids at one point. So I'd love to hear about that as well.
Awesome. Oh, that's so exciting. First of all, yes, I know 3 and 6, that's a fascinating age. So many why questions. Oh my. So what I think is fascinating is everybody knows nursery rhymes, right? So I guess when you look at the community building in children's music, for quite a long time now, there's been sort of a dual thing happening where there's very well-known commercial, I guess I'd say, nursery rhyme music that is super popular, perennial, is the old favorites. Everybody knows all these different nursery rhymes from around the world, which is a beautiful long-term kind of connection all us parents have with our own childhoods. Whichever country we're from, we've probably got our own tradition of the songs that our parents and grandparents sang. But more recently, there's a huge explosion of independent kids music artists creating music really led by their communities or their children or the world they live in. And that is creating really, really strong sort of tribes, I guess, of music fans, based on, like you say, like when you were a little kid and they love a song, they won't just listen to it twice. They'll say, can I have it again and again and again? So you get artists will probably come through when you look at data. You'll get songs that just go completely crazy in terms of numbers, because if it's one that like taps into a little zeitgeist of something, that's really just like a universal experience of either parenthood or childhood, those songs just seem to sort of rise through. So you have what in different countries, like in Australia, you got the huge act of the Wiggles, but then sort of within that, you've got new sounds coming from really interesting alternative spaces, even Bluey, which is a TV animated series, but created by an amazing musical artist who creates and composes really fascinating and complex and beautiful music. And that's forming a huge kind of scene. And then even within that, more local scenes, you've got a lot of really different artists coming through there's like punk artists, there's folk artists, there's hip hop artists, and the same across the USA. There's been a real push to, have music that rises out of the communities that speaks to the experience of those children. So you really get a lot of genre clash if you think about it, that children's music is not one genre. It's very much more music. A lot of playlists you'll see will be music that kids love that parents don't hate is kind of a trend, and you'll often see parents will make their own playlists or recommendations to other parents like, hey, listen to this because your kids will love it, but you won't hate it. So I find that a super fascinating thing.
I love it. I love it. So in this conversation, we've already gone Afrobeats, Alta, to pop emo, to children's music. And at the core of it is obviously the artist, right? Or the composer or the creator of that. So everyone has their story of their favorite artist and how it became everyone's favorite artist. And so the question I pose for each of you is that, does the community lose part of what it makes it special when those artists do become mainstream? And I'll start with you, Jessica.
Yeah, I'm going to speak from my experience. I'm going to bring up the Jonas Brothers again, because that's at my core, one of my favorite bands. And they did actually start in the pop punk realm, but more pop rockish. And for me, I'm from New Jersey. I grew up seeing them. I was at their first ever concert when they were no ones. I would see them for like $5 for free at these little like Radio Disney concerts. And then couple of years go by and they become the biggest boy band in the world. They're on Disney Channel. And there was a point when they were not very famous where you could literally just walk up to them, say hello, ask for a picture. As I mentioned, the tickets were around $5, if not free. And all of a sudden they're on tour with Miley Cyrus as Hannah Montana. The tickets are absolutely impossible to get. And the fans that were there from the beginning, who I became friends with, at this point, I'm in 5th or 6th grade, a bunch of girls that lived in my area. We all remained very close, and we watched this band who we ultimately wanted to be successful, of course, because that's what the fans want from the beginning. We watched them go mainstream, and they turned into this, obviously they just received their Hollywood Walk of Fame star a couple weeks ago. So that's, at that point, I would never even have thought that when I was in 6th grade. But it definitely lost a bit when they went mainstream, and the community was still there. I'm still friends with these girls. We're still obviously fans. It just evolves and it just changes, at least in my perspective, because I still want the best for them and still want them to succeed, and will always have that time and that memory. The accessibility and the ease of seeing them, getting tickets, and being a part of something, it just kind of morphed and maybe became a little bit more difficult, but not any less exciting.
No, that's super interesting. Before I toss it to Elizabeth, and being a Jonas Brothers fan for that long, have you seen a shift where it might have been about meetups, it might have been about, exchanging, text messages, to more of an online forum? Is that something that kind of exists right now?
Absolutely. So I will say back in 2005, 2006 was when MySpace first came to be. And they were one of the first bands, in my opinion, to utilize that as a fan kind of community online, because it was pretty new in 2005. And they were one of the first bands to use it to message fans one-on-one individually. They would message me, say, hey, Jessica, we can't wait to see you this weekend. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, like they know who I am. That's so crazy, which is something on occasion, I think that they'll still do through Instagram DMs or Twitter. It's a little bit more rare. You'll see artists like Taylor Swift have implemented things like that through Tumblr, where they seek out fans. She invites them to their homes because she sees like how much they kind of ride for her on social media and in real life. So it's definitely, just because the way social media is now, it's even more enhanced. But back in the day, it was more like grassroots. Like you would join a street team and they'd mail you posters and they'd ask you to go hang them up at the mall. And now it's more like, hey, can you like pre-save our album on Spotify so that we can get in the playlists, or, stuff like that. So it definitely still exists, but it's just kind of evolved, like I said.
No, that's super interesting. And I'll toss it over to you, Elizabeth. And selfishly, when I'm in a previous life at Red Bull, I was very fortunate to do a lot of work within Africa. And so I think just what I've noticed personally is like the amount of like major labels that have imprints now, within Africa. It seems like the world is like trying to find the next artist before everyone else. So I'm interested to hear your perspective where you have, these, again, subcultures, you have these scenes and you have these artists that are just grinding and they're building their audiences very organically. And then they become super mainstream. Like, is the community losing something? Is it like, more of like a cheering section, or is it like, oh man, like we lost something that was so close to us and now it's for the world? Like, how's that going?
So just like you said, there's a lot of like major label imprints over here. So yes, I feel like definitely something does get lost. I'll give an example of an artist. I'm sure we all know Thames, the Nigerian act. Thames is actually one of the people that I used to listen to, like back when she started, and everybody termed her as an alternative artist, like alter. And it's not like a genre or something that was very popular in this region, right? And I mean, you keep grinding, hoping that obviously you become big and all of that. So I noticed that even though she's like main superstar level now, her sound has not completely changed from what she was doing before, right? But the only problem is that I kind of find it a bit annoying when I see news articles saying Afrobeat artist. I'm like, yo, that's not what she was doing before, and that's not what she's doing now. But automatically, once you become mainstream, they try to box you into one of these genres, right? So that's actually what it feels like. We are now disconnected, especially if you're someone like me. I actually love alternative music. Like, I like to listen to different sounds. I like to see how people are able to merge different sounds and do things differently and on their own. But then I read articles, and funny enough, all these communities actually have specific bloggers, specific websites that actually write things on these particular artists. But now mainstream media, so radio, all the types of radio is writing or speaking about them, all types of websites are speaking about them. And what is lost is they do not really write about the true nature of what the artist is. They kind of impose mainstream things onto them. So yeah, it feels like something is lost. Interesting enough, I feel like she's still very true to herself, and she's still doing what she loves to do and all of that. There are certain artists. There's also Amare from Ghana, who is very mainstream now, but still very much sticking to what she's doing. There's been certain artists that have switched a little the style, but you cannot necessarily fault them because, as you said, there's a lot of labels, major labels in here, and their A&Rs and their executives also have an idea on what they think will actually sell. Mind you, it's always business to these guys, so they have an idea of what they think will actually sell. So you would have to tweak your sound a little bit so that they can market it into certain spaces, or they can market it to Africa as a whole. But when you actually listen to their body of work, let's say if they do have a project, an album or an EP or any of those things out there, you do realize that maybe the lead single was a typical Afrobeat song. There are certain songs in there that still suits the community they are coming from, that still suits their different fan base. So I mean, it's still I still get what I want to from there. It's just that everybody else is lumping them into something that they are not necessarily are.
Totally. Thank you for that. Claudia, I mean, again, my assumption is it's almost like the opposite, right? It's like in children's music, it feels like the more mainstream you are, like you're actually, building this like massive community. But I'd love to hear your take on that as well.
Totally. Well, I think, again, a lot of the time now, I'd say artists who are growing, when they build a fandom and like a really dedicated kind of cheer squad, I guess, there's a lot of artists who I think those parents or educators who are the sort of the decision makers, right? Because they choose what their kids are going to listen to predominantly when kids are under sort of 8 years old. They are part of artist success because they are the advocates. They're the ones who tell their friends or their community or use the internet to use those songs to make reels, to go, have you heard this great song? And so I think within children's music, I think because the audience is so dedicated and loyal to the artists they love, when an artist does rise through and sort of gain a wider fan base, overall, it's not such a cool factor. You know, I think most children's music that gets made is reasonably evergreen. So if you hear the song that was made 5 years ago, most likely a kid who hears it now, it'll still be cool to that little kid, you know, because if they like diggers, they like diggers, and nothing changing that, you know. So I think that's an interesting thing about fan communities in the children's space. Also, however, the flip side is that while the music is reasonably evergreen, the fan communities will evolve because children age out a bit, right? So you'll get children grow up, and before you know it, they are definitely asking for Taylor Swift, you know, not for, you know, the I'm a Little Teacup or you know, the fantastic original music that they've discovered through their music classes. So it's definitely a very different scene overall because of the way that parents and kids and teachers act as kind of there's a lot of intermediaries who introduce the music. So while there might be an artist in a small town with a community in an organic local kind of way, a bigger driver of this music scene is obviously, like Jessica was saying, the internet is obviously like broadening that reach. And so what we're finding is a lot of musical genres within the umbrella that would be kids music are rising through. And so people who love hip hop music can find awesome, really conscious, big ideas, amazing artists coming through who will speak to their sort of aesthetic as a parent and go, okay, but I want my kids to like sing about human rights as well as diggers and sandcastles.
Totally. No, I love that. Thank you for that. I know we got 10 minutes left, so there's some questions coming in. So I'm going to start throwing them out there, and feel free to raise your hand to take it in. But we have one coming in from Jason asking, in the emerging development stage of an artist, how important is performing live in local communities? Anyone want to take that?
I'll take that if you'd like. Yeah, I think as someone who attends concerts regularly and works at concerts, to me, the opening artists for other bands is incredibly important. It makes me know that they should be on my radar. A lot of times we see with like TikTok artists, we try to bring them onto music festivals or book them for shows, and they've never done a live show before, but they have 1.5 million followers on TikTok, or they get a crazy amount of streams, but they've never performed live or done a tour. And I think it's very important for them to go out into the world in real life and also perform. And it just makes a huge difference for fans to actually feel like they're connecting with them in real life and just kind of solidifying their music and whatever projects they're working on.
Nice. I know, Elizabeth, you had your hand up for a hot second.
Yes, so yeah, it's just like Jessica said, it's actually very, very important in the sense that for being an artist in Africa or in Ghana, once you're emerging, you probably do not have like a complete team, right? You don't have people going out or working completely to get your song to be discovered. You're doing things pretty much on your own. And the best possible way, maybe aside social media, for people, even social media, you can post your link, but the guarantee that people are actually going to click and listen to it, it's not sure. But for performing in a space, you know that you have similar type of music with the audience that are going to be at the particular space or the particular concert. You know that once you play the song, automatically they're gonna listen to your song, they're gonna hear the song, and that puts you in a very good space for people to discover the other songs that you have. There's also now Shazam, so probably when you're playing a DJ set, people can just click on it and then Shazam your song and then go back home and enjoy it. So it's actually very important. I think it's actually like a very good A&R to get discovered pretty much.
Nice, nice. There's a follow-up that came in the chat asking if these scenes are about a specific artist or if it's just about the community. I think you both answer that, in a way where, even though someone might come out for a specific artist, to your point, Jessica, it was like, those are the fans that also pay attention to that entire lineup or, that entire set to say, okay, cool. To your point, these are the people that should be on my radar. So, I'm glad that you were able to touch on that.
Can I add to that a little?
Yeah. Sorry, Claudia.
I guess to support that, I think that venues that put on, series of events is a really big driver, like you say, of for artists playing live. A lot of the time, a venue can become a community builder in itself when it brings through similar or acts from a genre or a particular scene, in series. So therefore, it builds a lot of trust with an audience and a local community that they know they could go to that venue. And they know, like you said, for an emo night, it's like for kids' music, that's very common that there are some amazing kids' music series put on by, for instance, Wolf Trap in the United States does a beautiful children's music series. So they'll invite different artists to come and play. So that local audience then gets exposed to like local and visiting artists. And that's very much a commonality here in New Zealand where I am. So I think those venues becoming kind of advocates are a big driver too.
No, that's a great point. Being someone from the Midwest where we had quite a few venues, they definitely were the ones that were driving the community and driving, us coming close and being fans of specific artists or specific types of music. So totally get that. We have a question in from Dom. Elizabeth, I'm looking at you. Given that there are major labels in Africa, is there any advice that you have for up and coming indie labels?
Yes, I think I do. I think I do. So for up and coming indie labels, there's always the idea that major labels are into like suck your blood or something like that. But that's why there's always a contract, right? You just need to read or get somebody who completely understands the terms of whatever is being handed to you. Major labels are going to come in and then they might want to imprint into your indie label. I think especially in Africa, we kind of need to have an open mind. The music scene, the music business scene is still very young over here. And no matter how we look at it, we actually need all the help we can get. We just need to be smart about it. So we just need, they are now, fortunately for us, like we're now having a lot of people going into entertainment law and music business executives actually going for courses and schools and all of that. So once you're an indie label, looking out, definitely if a major label is looking into you and looking to work with you, that means you're doing something amazing already. Just make sure you're being smart about everything that you're doing. You're not losing out in anything, but just keep an open mind. I know a lot of people are like, no, I'm not going to work with major labels, but no matter how you look at it, they make some of the best superstars. So just look at ways and means to collaborate with them, which is beneficial to you, the artist, and the major label. So just keep an open mind, pretty much.
That's some great advice. All right, we got 3 minutes left, so I'm going to go into my final question for each of you. I think could be a quick one. So, your top tip on how an artist can help develop a community within their genre. We'll start with you, Claudia.
Awesome. Okay, well, I would say be a fan of other artists within your genre, because creating artist connections, whether that through official collabs and co-writes or just supporting each other, like putting on co-promoted shows or even virtual shows, helps you introduce your growing community of audience and fans to their audience and fans. And really, I think people love to discover like minds. We're all looking for kindred spirits, whether we're music makers or music appreciators. And so that would be my top tip, is really kind of like follow those pathways, be a fan, join fandoms yourself of your favorite artists, especially ones you aspire to, that you might look at as a role model for how you might evolve your own career. and really kind of learn from them. And I think that reciprocity will always pay dividends in your involvement as an artist and your community following.
No, I love that. Jessica, I'll toss it over to you.
Sure. I think one of the biggest things to start a community would be communication. As an artist or a band, I think being accessible, talking to your fans, making them feel like they belong or that they're a part of something will automatically make them be like, oh, you have to listen to this band. They're really involved with their fan base. Their music's amazing. And people will be really drawn to that if it's genuine. And if you're doing something original, I think people can see through when it's just a copycat of an aesthetic or something that's already been done. They can tell when people are kind of mooching and not being like a genuine, interest in their fans. And I think that just communicating with them, making them feel like they're a part of this journey with you and your music career, I think that's really special and just a really nice place to start, especially if you're beginning, or even when you're a bigger fan, like someone, as you mentioned, Taylor Swift. She makes it a point to have this communication, have a lot of things that she can relate to with the fans, even though she is, maybe the most unrelatable person ever, but at the same time not. She loves her cats, she loves baking cookies, and girls and guys, we all feel like, okay, there's something there, like we can connect with her, and she actually will DM people and do stuff like that. So whether you're a small emo pop punk band or an artist like Taylor Swift, Dua Lipa, they connect with their fans in a certain way just by communicating and doing their art. So I think that's a good way to start building your own community.
Amazing. Before we come to an end, Elizabeth?
Yes, so since Jessica has mentioned the community and the fans, and Claudia has mentioned collaborations, what I'm going to mention is I think most people sometimes do not get that the community is not just about obviously your fans and then other artists that sound like you or are doing the same thing like you. The bloggers, that's one thing that I constantly talk about. Like there are a lot of writers focusing on certain type of community. So what I just want to say is that just make sure you reciprocate the kind of support these bloggers or websites or writers are putting out there about your music, because they are actually the ones that know exactly where you probably began from. They know the genesis of your story. They know your true artistry, because there are a couple of writers focusing basically on that in Ghana over here. And I will just need or want these artists to give them that sort of support, so that once the websites or bloggers actually grow, your brand equally grows, and then the other people in your community also grow along with it. Thank you.
Amazing. I'd like to thank you, Claudia, Jessica, Elizabeth, Measure of Music, for bringing this music community together today. Hope everyone enjoyed this conversation, and I wish everyone a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a wonderful conversation, and any opportunity to bring up pop punk is one that I love, so I appreciate it, and lovely to have everyone and appreciate the time. Wonderful. Oh, and of course, I have to say thank you so much to Manny, and thank you to SoundCloud for being one of our sponsors as well. Really appreciate it.